Welcome to On the Bauble Podcast, episode 51. I'm your host, Subasa Ueda, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. Today we're going to be talking about how to draft Maxx in Bright Lights Draft. We're going to go over key cards, we're going to go over the deck outline, like what cards to avoid, and a couple of different archetypes that we think you can draft as Maxx. But before we do that, we're going to talk about Battlehardened in Vancouver and Calling Melbourne that happened this weekend. You played in one of them. Which one did you play in?
I played in the Battlehardened in Vancouver and the PTI event. It's where we're from. Hard to justify flying across the world and spending a full day on a plane, thousands of dollars to go to Calling Melbourne when you can just play a Battlehardened at home. So that was really fun. I enjoyed that weekend, and you were also at the Battlehardened.
Yeah, so instead of playing, though, I was a floor judge at the Battlehardened. The Battlehardened itself ran pretty good, I thought.
Yeah, I think the Battlehardened was quite well run. I'll give a quick summary. I got to the event hall like 3 minutes before it started because I was having trouble getting my printer working, and I kind of slept in. And then I had to scribble down my deck list because my printer wasn't working. And I didn't play very well. Round one, I got paired into our local Ian, and he flipped up a Rain Razors face up in Arsenal, and then played his turn, and I blocked 3 on his blue Bolton shot, and then he played Rain Razors. I'm like, he had the Rain Razors from hand, and then he reloaded and attacked with his reloaded arrow, and I'm like, why didn't he flip up his arrow, and why is he wasting snaps here? He must want me to block this. He's baiting me. Then he's gonna Bolton shot reload. That's what's going on. He's gonna Bolton shot reload and Codex me because he's played a 3 of a kind. Then at the end of the game, Ian's just like, yeah, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have flipped up Rain Razors at the start of that turn. I was like, you flipped the Rain Razors face up on the table? I had no idea until he told me afterwards. So I was just kind of out of it that day. And I don't think I played very well. So I went 2-2 drop. One of my wins was a bye. I lost 2 mirrors. It was not a great day for me. I don't think I really deserved to do any better. It was just, yeah.
You did seem out of it on Saturday. It didn't look like you were playing well or enjoying yourself that day. But
Yeah.
I saw you play the Shapeshifter Sealed halfway through the day too.
That's true. I did play Shapeshifter Sealed for the first time. It was pretty fun. I tried to play Oldhim with Spider's Bite and Titan's Fist. I think it was greedy. I think I should have played Spider's Bite and Hatchet. Hatchet a body or mind. It doesn't really matter which one. So I could pitch 1 blue and come in for 3. I died to one of our locals, well, semi-local. He comes from Vancouver Island, which is a ferry right away. He comes to our PQs though, and he was on Kodachi Briar. And it was just this really sick value deck, and I was playing this stupid 65 card pile, and he was just playing 35 cards, and it was like, my deck's just better than yours. I'm more efficient. And I was like, I can't win.
I think we're going to be talking about this a little bit later in the episode too, but you still want to be playing efficient cards in your deck. A 2 block that does nothing else is just not that good still. And if it does less than that, then you shouldn't really be playing in your deck still. But if it is a 3 block, you should almost always be playing it in Shapeshifter Sealed because it is so hard to convert your hand. Yeah, I guess if you had Spider's Bite and Hatchet, it might be a little bit easier to convert cards in that format too.
Yeah, you can block 3 cards, Spider's Bite, Hatchet. Seems okay.
Yeah, pretty good. Okay, and let's also talk about a little bit about Calling Melbourne and the breakout deck from that format, or from that event. So, what do you think about that Dash.io deck that went 13-0, 14-0 before the finals, and then losing to the Azuri in the finals?
Yeah, it was definitely very cool to see Dash.io kind of sort of come out of nowhere and do so well. I'll say that Dash.io is a deck that's been on my radar, and I think has been on a lot of testing groups' radar. They're aware of the deck. The deck looked fairly similar to the build that we had and builds that I've seen going around. So it wasn't a total unknown, but it was surprising to see it do so well. Very, very cool deck. A lot of fun to play. I would definitely recommend checking out the games on stream and maybe trying out the deck yourself. I'm not sure what I think about the deck in total. The deck kind of reminds me of a Mechanologist and Kano all at the same time, because you're doing dash things where you're boosting Spark of Genius High Octane, but you're also just playing cards off the top and playing Tome of Findles and kind of having these really broken turns. It feels like when the deck does its thing, it's almost unstoppable, much like Kano. The highs of that deck are just crazy, but it also feels very glass cannon. You're playing a deck full of items that don't block. You can get some really awkward hands. you're like prone to disruption. Like if you get CNC'd, it's kind of a disaster because maybe you only have two cards that block, and then if you block with those cards, you have two items in hand, and you're really sad. So I think the deck's like pretty fragile, and I'm not quite sure if it's good enough, but I guess we'll see at Worlds. Yeah, my take right now is that I'm not sure that the deck is quite good enough, but I could also be missing something. I think the deck is quite hard to pilot optimally. So if I had to guess, I think it's maybe a little bit of a flash in the pan for now and might get solved later, or maybe somebody has an even more refined deck for Worlds, and we'll see it there. I don't know.
So, by the sounds of it, I don't think you're gonna be bringing Dash IO to Worlds.
I don't think so. I've been spending this week kind of exploring the deck and taking a second look at it. I had actually already explored it quite a bit early in the format and dismissed it. There's a couple of changes I wanted to try, like the backup protocols, which I do think are a notable improvement, but I think that the deck is still I don't think it's quite there, and I don't think I can get enough reps on it in time. So I think I don't know what I'm taking. I might take Dromai. Dromai seems pretty good. Bravo seems pretty good. Regular Dash seems pretty good.
Yeah, that seems fair. That seems fair. We're recording on November 8th. So Worlds is coming up in, what, 8 days? When are you flying out for this thing?
Is it really 8 days?
Isn't it 8 days? November
17th on the Friday. Yeah, I guess, yeah, 9 days. I'm flying out on the Sunday the 12th, and I get in on Monday the 13th. They are 9 hours ahead of us, and then it's also like I think I spend like 16 hours on a plane or something, or plane / airports. So between it all, I spend basically an entire day traveling, and I get there Monday at like 2 p.m. or something. I think most of the people I'm staying with that I test with, we all have like an Airbnb, and we're all getting in kind of like Monday morning or afternoon. So it'll be fun.
That's sick. That's sick. Are you gonna go sightseeing, traveling before the event, or are you gonna do that like after everything's done?
We'll probably do a little bit. The team's planning to go see the Sagrada Familia, which is like a very big church done by a famous architect, Gaudi. That's big tourist attraction, but it also looks very, very cool. And everybody I know that's been to see it, so it's well worth seeing. So I'm looking forward to that. We might also wander the city a little bit, but I imagine we'll also be spending quite a bit of time testing, drafting, all that kind of stuff. I am staying for 4 days afterwards. I think I'm leaving on the Friday, so I'll have the full day Monday through Thursday after the Worlds event to just I don't know, actually enjoy the city and not have to worry about Worlds.
That's fair. That's fair. Let's just move right into Maxx. Unfortunately, I don't think we can get all the episodes, like all the how to draft each hero videos done before Worlds, but it's gonna be definitely coming out after Worlds. For Teklo and Dash. This week we're gonna be talking about all about Maxx Nitro. I guess before we talk into Maxx Nitro, which of the three heroes do you think is the strongest, or which hero do you want to be on in Bright Light's draft if you like if it was completely open on either three of the heroes, or like you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, I think all of the heroes and bright lights are quite good if they're open, and I think the format's flexible enough that you should draft the open hero. But if I had my choice, I would definitely be on Dash. I think that Dash is just it feels like when you get the nuts Dash deck and it does what it wants to do, I don't think any deck can keep up with it. The amount of value you get when you play items off the top, especially the red items off the top, is just so crazy. In the PTI event, actually, I got to top 8. It was a draft PTI, and our local Lucas, who beat me twice at ProQuest last week, also beat me in this draft PTI event. And yeah, he just hit a red item off the top every single turn of the game, and you don't win those games.
Yeah, being able to play red items off the top is like having a 5 card hand every other turn, so it's kind of gross.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the ceiling on Dash is just really, really high, and the deck is also a lot of fun. It also feels kind of low variance in a sense, which is like weird to say because like you can draw these all item hands that can kill you, and it depends on seeing items on the top of your deck. But like I guess I'm thinking of like the Teklovosen versus Dash matchup where you can kind of like take your time and you have complete information about what you're boosting, so you just never boost away key cards, and it just kind of feels like you're just like It's like almost like a chess match where you're just like slowly building towards like whatever your win condition is, like probably overpower and boom grenades, and you just blow them up and they can't really interact with you.
That seems fair. That seems fair. That seems fair.
What about you? Which hero do you think is the strongest?
I kind of like Dash or Max. They're the two heroes that lets you go over the top through
Mhm.
Teklo. Teklo is, I think, the hero with the highest floor. So if you draft Teklo, you get like a couple of first pick evos. Then you're always gonna have these like nice solid 2-1 drafts. But then you always run into this one person that has the Nut Dash deck or the Nut Max deck or even the Nut Teklo deck, and then it feels like you hit a brick wall and you can't beat it. But Max and Dash is the decks that like lets you be like, look at this sweet Dash deck. I can like kill you on turn 3 through like with like overpowered boom boom, or like Max is the same kind of thing. Is like I can present like 22 damage with this deck, but
Yeah.
Teklo can't do that. So I think I have a slight favor towards Dash right now, but I really like Max as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think Max is very strong. Takes a little bit of getting used to. I think both in terms of deck building, which hopefully we can help you out with today, but also the gameplay. I think that there's like some practice for Max for sure about like when you're making hyperdrivers and just kind of like managing your hyperdriver setup and your setup in general, especially into Teklevosen. I think that matchup, I think the aggro matchups are straightforward enough, but the Teklevosen matchup does take some practice. So
Okay, man, let's move right in. So what is Max's key gameplay? Like what is Max trying to do on like a macro perspective?
I think that Max is a very, very good very, very good value deck that can play a variety of hand sizes. And his kind of like core gameplay is boosting, making a hyperdriver, and swinging Banksy. There's a lot of just like efficient hands you can do. Like once you have a hyperdriver, you can play a 1 for 4 boosting, pitching a blue, you get a resource back. You have 3 resources, then you can hyperdriver Banksy, and that's just a 2 card 7. So it's like a Raging Onslaught. But you also have the on hit of Banksy, which is pretty nice, and you get the hyperdriver to store for your next turn. So you're just like very efficient and on rate, and you can do this once. It feels like once you get especially 2 hyperdrivers, if you get like 2 hyperdrivers and a 5 card hand, you can do some very explosive things because you end up getting these 2 extra resources and you can just go way over the top and present 15 to 20 damage fairly reliably, I think, if your deck is good.
Yeah, I think so too. You can easily pump out 20 damage plus with a double hyperdriver turn. And the thing is, you can always set it up too, right? Like you can like Arsenal a rev up or like Arsenal a 1 for 4 boost and then wait for a hand where you have like 2 more reds and a blue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the deck really wants to have the hyperdriver up, especially if you have like rev ups and jump starts, the cards that get discounted by hyperdrivers. But in general, like most of your lines work way better when you have a hyperdriver. When you're on no hyperdriver, your 2 card hand of like 4 for 1 boost, make a hyperdriver pass is pretty underwhelming. So I think that like one of the key things in Max is like managing your hyperdrivers, and not that you can't go off them. I think sometimes you can go off of all your hyperdrivers if your turn is big enough, but you need to be careful about when you do it because it feels like if you get rid of all your hyperdrivers, you do kind of need to like build back up before you can have good turns again.
I think sometimes you actually do want to be like attack for 4, just make a hyperdriver no Banksy, and then like Arsenal
Mhm.
a red. I think those kinds of lines, like being able to know when to actually not swing Banksy and like keep an extra counter on your hyperdriver is kind of important too to
Yeah.
set up your double hyperdriver turns. Because if you only always crank your hyperdriver, you're never gonna get the double hyperdriver turn, right?
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Question: do you like going first or second as Max, or does it depend on the matchup?
I like going second with Max.
Mhm.
I don't mind going first with Max if my opponent makes me, but I
Mhm.
still always want to go second. It's just you gotta convert your hand and like use your hand efficiently, set up your pitch stack. It's just like and rip your opponent's hand apart. It's just still good to go second.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm a little bit on the fence into like dash, for example, but I think it is good to go second. It's very close in Max because like the value of getting a hyperdriver onto going first is like pretty good. Like it kind of feels like if you start the game with a hyperdriver on two, you're like kind of set up, and sometimes your first turn is like a little bit
Awkward.
awkward, not as explosive as you'd like it's sometimes hard to have like a really nice turn 0 but or turn 1 if you're going second, but I still think it is a little better going second overall.
I think if you go first and just go like attack with a boost card, make a hyperdriver, it's fine. Arsenal card. You get to set up for your first turn, but then your opponent still gets to attack you on
Hmm.
their on like as they get to go second. And if you don't block, you just like leak damage, and then you have to do your explosive turn. Um, Otherwise, you just go second and you do your setup turn while presenting like a 1 for 4 boost or 2 for 5 boost, and then making Hyperdriver attacking with Banksy, ripping their hand apart a little bit.
Hmm.
And you still end up with the Hyperdriver at the end. So I feel like you still just want to go second. Try and get the same kind of setup as though you went first, and try and disrupt your opponent. And I think I talked about this last week, but it's really important to not let your opponent keep a 4 card hand, because if they want to keep a 4 card hand, they're going to anyways. But like, if you let them keep a 4 card hand for free, then they're just gonna convert it. Like, this set has so many boosts. There's so many ways to get go again that they can convert their 4 card hand if you just like attacked with like one boost card and not swing with Banksy. You're just gonna you're gonna get hit hard on the swing back, and then you might not be able to get a turn back where you can use your hyperdriver efficiently and set up a 5 card hand for yourself. So you still need to attack them. You still need to disrupt them somehow.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes like the trap I sometimes see Max falling into is you go first, you set up your hyperdriver, you take like 10 damage or whatever, 9 damage, they go like 5-4 or whatever, and Arsenal. And then you come back and you're like, look at this sweet 18 damage turn. And they're like, yeah, block with like a card or a couple of equipment, go to 4. I'm gonna attack you for 18 or like 15 or whatever, and you're gonna have to block now. And then you're just kind of in this losing endgame. I've seen this kind of game state happen quite a bit. So I agree that you kind of it's very scary to give your opponent a full hand, especially as you start to get to those lower life totals. You have to be very careful about dropping too low too quickly.
Because of the existence of a card called Boom Grenade, it's
Yeah,
you really need to stay above 4 or 5 if possible.
yeah, agreed.
Okay, you wanna move on to key cards?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so for key cards for Max, we're just gonna be talking about cards you like definitely just want in your deck. This is so in the set Bright Lights, every single card is a mech card that's draftable. So there's a lot of replaceable cards in Bright Lights like Lay Waste and Outpaste, which is like one of the best boost cards in the set. But in reality, if you have like a dive through data instead of an Outpaste, there's not that much of a difference. But the key cards we're gonna be talking about are cards that are like close to unreplaceable and cards that you definitely want in your deck. And if you see it in a pack and you already know you're a max, you should definitely pick these cards up.
And I think it's worth noting that like I think the biggest key to a really good max deck is just having a lot of really good boost cards. So a lot of your deck is just going to be the 4-for-1 and 5-for-2 boost cards, but then you want some of these key cards to push your deck over. The 4-for-1s and 5-for-1s are kind of like I don't know, like the staples of your deck. You need a bunch of those, and you're going to be playing a bunch of those.
This is the first set of cards actually that's going to be very important is the Majestic Red Instant Evos. So Evo Circuit Breaker, Evo Atom Breaker, Evo Face Breaker, and Evo Mac Breaker. I think of all 4 of these, the best one by far is Evo Face Breaker. The Evo Face Breaker is Evo where it says whenever you boost, you may destroy a card underneath it, and then that attack gets +2. And all of the Evos here have that same kind of line. It says whenever you boost, then you can destroy a card underneath it, and it does some kind of ability. The one to really keep your eye out for is Evo Facebreaker, because this one just slots into Max deck just with no work. And it functions like a 0-for-6 or 0-for-8. So this is just like an auto include if you see it, and you should just like aggressively play towards this card.
Yeah. You can also play it on your opponent's turn to prevent it prevents damage when you play it. equal to twice the number of hyperdrivers that you put under it. So if you have 2 hyperdrivers, you can play it at instant speed, prevent 4 damage, and then on your turn you can get the +2 every time you boost. Notably, it's not a once per turn effect, so you can stack these all up on a turn, and it's a great way to go over the top. I'll say that with this card, especially if you ever wind up in like a weird spot where you have like 3 hyperdrivers, sometimes even just like 2 hyperdrivers, like you don't always actually want to get rid of all of your hyperdrivers, especially if it's like a aggro matchup and you think your hand might be getting stripped. Sometimes leaving yourself 1 hyperdriver is good, but the card is very, very good. So just like I think certainly if I ever have 3 hyperdrivers, I'm probably leaving the most healthy one and putting 2 under, because you still get 3 activations, which is more than enough. And sometimes trying to get the 4 activations out of it is like almost more of a liability than just having your hyperdriver to make sure you can get all your activations and just actually win the game. So that's one thing I noticed playing the card.
Yeah, just don't get too greedy with it.
Yeah.
Just because you can do it doesn't mean you have to do it.
And I'll say that the head and the legs are very good. They basically let you keep cards in deck. The legs give you quicken tokens, so you don't need to boost as much. The head lets you shuffle 2 attack actions from your banish into your deck. So again, cards in deck really helps against Teklovosin. But the chess piece gives you 2 resources, and you can do it multiple times per turn. And I think that the chess piece is actually not as good as Facebreaker, but pretty close. It is the next best piece by quite a bit, in my opinion. Just the ability to get multiple resources multiple times is crazy. If I have this chess piece, I actively want like a couple 0 cost boosts, not very many, but a few. And you can just have these turns where you like play 5 boost cards and never pitch, because you can get like 6 resources from your chest and maybe you have a hyperdriver or something, and you just destroy them. So I think the chess piece is also extremely powerful.
During the PTI event, I actually got eliminated by Clay, who ended up in the finals. But during his second draft, he had a leveler Maxx deck that was playing Evil Circuit Breaker, and he decked me out, and I was on Teklovosin. So Evil Circuit Breaker is a very good card to fatigue your opponent if that's the line you have to take to beat Teklovosin. All of these cards are, some of these, like the red Evos, are not auto includes, but you might need to warp your deck around it to make them work even better in your decks. So just like a note that it's not just because you have like a Mac breaker doesn't make it an auto include when you see it.
Okay, on to the non-majestic reasons to play Maxx. Of course, you're not likely to see majestics, but I think it's worth noting that they're like Flesh and Blood doesn't have very many bombs, but these cards are bombs in the way that I feel like, like you get V for the Vanguard, and it's like pretty good reason to play Bolton. If you get an Evo Facebreaker early, pretty good reason to play Maxx. Same kind of idea here. The next one that I think is just, I don't know about you, for me, this is like one of the best cards in the set at rare. That card is Gigawatt. This is a 1 cost 2 block that gives your next Mechanologist attack +4. Notably, unlike the other pumps in the set, you don't need to boost, and it can also apply to weapons. So in Maxx, it is very potent because you can give Banksy +4 and make it come in for a breakpoint of 7 and then get that on hit most likely, which is very, very good. But you can also do some really disgusting things with this. Like you can pump any attack that has overpower. So if you have like an overload script and an infused titanium, you can come in for like 11 overpower. You can put it on a hydraulic press. You can put it on a ratchet up. Ratchet up's another really good one, like 2 for 9. It's really easy to turn on ratchet up's effect. If an item's been destroyed, all your opponent's actions get -1, and then you come in with a 9 power ratchet up that they can't really block. Like it's very good.
I like Torque Tune because it's a clean 2 card 3 cost for 10 overpower too.
Yeah, Torque Tune is a great one. So yeah, I think Gigawatt's good in every deck, and I'm very happy for picking this card, but it is especially good in Maxx.
Yeah, it has more application in Maxx than other decks, but other decks still just want it because it's so good.
Yeah, I think just like stapling it to these other attacks is pretty crazy.
On the same topic of like pumping up like cards with overpowered, Bulbar is a card that's really good at Maxx. So this is the next key card that we're going to talk about. Bulbar with Gigawatt is a clean 9 overpowered. Bulbar reads, it's a 2/5 boost that says if you have a hyperdriver, this card gets overpowered. And the other 2 heroes can't really make a hyperdriver, so it doesn't usually have overpowered. But Maxx gets to create hyperdrivers for free, essentially. So Bulbar almost always comes in for 5 overpowered, and you're really looking for cards that boost this card's attack. So any of the boost pumpers like recharge and quick shots, quick fire, they can also pump up the bull bar. So this card is a really good finisher in Maxx. So if your opponent's trying to fatigue you out, then you really want to have a copy of bull bar to be able to just push damage through. Notably, what's important about bull bar is you need to control a hyperdriver for it to have overpowered. Um, but that also means that when you boost the Bulbar, Hyperdriver will disappear, and then Bulbar doesn't see a Hyperdriver, so it loses overpowered essentially. What's important would be to just attack with Bulbar, just don't boost the Bulbar, because then Hyperdriver will stay on the.
Yeah, either that or you need a hyperdriver on 2 or more counters so that when you boost it, it doesn't go away.
Yes, yes. But you have to be aware of it. Like, you can't be like, oh, I'm gonna play these like recharges. Actually, recharge works, but I'm gonna play all these gas ups and then play a bull bar boosting, and then the hyperdriver disappears and you're attacking for like 10 no overpowered, and that's your whole turn. I seen some people get into trouble where like, oh wait, this card doesn't have overpowered anymore. It gets blocked out. That was his win condition, and then they get fatigue out or something like that.
Next key card we mentioned is recharge. So again, this is one of the pumps. This one adds a counter to a hyperdriver, so it's just really easy to get the value out of it. It's just a 4-for-1, add a counter to a hyperdriver, so it's kind of like a 5-for-1. And the counter on your hyperdriver is really powerful because this lets you get to your 2 hyperdriver turn. I think the red is great, the yellow is fine.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that was good.
recharge, good card.
Yeah, I think it just sets up. You need recharge to beat Teklevossen to have multiple turns where you can have the hyperdrivers up. So I would, out of the 3, you must boost pump cards. Recharge is the best one by far in limited.
Yeah. Notably, Gas Up, which is the one that can put a hyperdriver from your banish into play, has a very high ceiling. Because you can even like crank the hyperdriver and get an extra action point. So when you pull it off, it's very good, but it's also hard to pull off. I kind of like if you have a hyperdriver in your deck, which you don't necessarily want to have, I like the blue one actually, because it's just a blue, but if you ever get to pull off the thing, it's like a very broken blue.
You know what? I've never thought of it that way. That's a kind of a cool idea, is to play blue gas ups if you play a hyperdriver red, just in case you boost it randomly.
I did this in the PTQ ProQuest, our draft ProQuest against Eric Keelback. Turn 1, I boost to make a hyperdriver. I'm like, I hit a hyperdriver. I'm going to play this blue gas up from my hand, get this hyperdriver, cog workspace, make another hyperdriver, pass with a hyperdriver on 3 and 2.
Holy, that's gross.
And I got an arsenal. The game was not very close after that.
Yeah, it does not sound close.
But I mean, even I think more realistically, what I've had happen other times is you pitch it early, and then in your second cycle you draw into it, and then you have a higher chance of having it. So I've liked, like, I don't want to go crazy with them. I'm not like I want like as many blue gas up as I can get, but it's like it's a pretty okay blue.
That's fair. That's fair. And moving on, we're gonna be talking about Crankshaft and Big Bertha. So this is the one that if you banish it off the top of your deck, then you can put counter on your hyperdriver. Why do you like this card, Yuki?
It just helps you stay on your hyperdrivers. I don't think you want to go nuts with them. Like I think the blues are the best one, and I like the red crankshaft because it's just a 2-for-5. The red Big Bertha is like okay, but a little expensive. Mm-hmm. But I think that I don't think they're like super high picks, but I think that they're picks that you can get in the middle of the pack that other decks aren't going to value as highly. And I can tell you the decks, like I've had a deck that has like 6 or 7 of these effects, and it feels broken. It's not like a must have or anything, but if you have multiple of these effects and you do this a couple times in a game, it does really add up. And notably, even if your hyperdriver would be destroyed when you boost, you can order the triggers so that you put the crankshaft on the hyperdriver and then the hyperdriver ticks down and you don't actually lose the hyperdriver even if it was on 1.
Yep. I think that is a good point. I think we keep on talking about like recharge, crankshaft, Big Bertha, and keeping more counters on hyperdrivers. the way that Maxx really goes over the top is double hyperdrive turns, and these cards are the cards that allow you to set up the double hyperdrive turns. You want to have as many ways to get to the double hyperdrive turn. Maxx, unlike the other decks, is the most dependent on boosting, so that also just means that you are going to banish good cards off the top of your deck. You know, if you play Maxx 20 times and you boost 50 times, you just have to boost some of your key cards, right? So you need to make sure you have multiple different ways to get to the breakpoints. And Crankshaft and Big Bertha is like the extra couple of percentage points that you need to push this deck over the top, essentially.
Yeah, the blues are like super, super premium, I think, in particular. And the red crankshaft, very premium. The other colors are like fine for both cards, but not
Yeah,
as
I
not
think
as high
yellow. I
points.
think yellow. I think Crankshaft in all colors is fine. Just
Yeah.
because like the yellow 2 for 4 go again is fine. The Big Bertha is a little bit more awkward because like it's just hard to play Big Bertha on and play like more cards on the same turn. But the blue one itself still blocks for 3, pitches for 3 resources, so it's good that way.
Yeah, the difference between 2 and 3 in the deck is really big because, like, another thing I've noticed is if you do get on 2 hyperdrivers, you can play like a 2 cost boost off of a blue. So you have 1 floating, you get 2 hyperdriver triggers, and then you can make a hyperdriver and Banksy again. So you can kind of like stay on 2 hyperdrivers for a while and present 2 card 8s, which is really strong. But the 3 cost doesn't give you that flexibility, and just there's a lot more hands that don't work when you have a 3 cost.
Let's move on. So this is also almost like a Max specific card. It's called Jumpstart. Jumpstart is a 2 cost for 5 with boost, and it costs 1 less to play if you have a hyperdriver. So this is basically a 1 for 5 boost. It's
It's
Zipper
zipper
Hit.
hit.
Yeah, Zipper Hit's good in this format. Just play it.
I mean, zipper hit is a constructed staple.
That's so funny.
It's true. Like every mech deck. I guess I shouldn't say every mech deck.
Yeah, I don't play Zipper Hit in my Dash deck.
Every mech deck that is playing boost cards and planning to boost them plays red and yellow zipper hit.
Yep, they're good. They're so good.
They're very, very, very good. And Jumpstart is like, yeah, I agree. It's like the payoff for being Max. The most insane, like the yellow Jumpstarts, like the mid pack yellow Jumpstarts, feel like your reward for being in Max when he's open. People are just like, I don't really want this yellow 2 for 4, and you're like, I get a yellow 1 for 4. This is sick.
It's so true. It's so flexible. It's good in second cycle. It's good in first cycle. Man, what a good card.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning really quickly, like Rev Up is also solid. It's like throttle, but I think it's quite a bit worse than the Jumpstart because when you don't have the hyperdriver and it costs 3, just like the Big Bertha we were talking about, it's such a pain. So I think that jumps like Rev Up is like fine and you can play it, but I think it's like a lot worse than the Jumpstart, basically.
Yeah, I agree. Just a 2 for 6 go again is a lot harder to play than a 1 for 5 go again. It's just like it works. It's just easier to play multiple cards the less your cards cost, and
Yeah.
and as long as they still come in for breakpoints, that's what you need. And Rev Up for 6 is not a breakpoint, so it's less good because it's also not a breakpoint.
Yeah, going from 4 to 5 means that if they just want to block with 1 card, they leak 2. But going from 5 to 6, you're like almost incentivizing them to just give you like 2 clean 3 blocks on it, so it doesn't feel as impactful.
We're going to talk about a little bit about equipment here. It's going to be the Cogwork Chest and Cogwork Arm. These ones in particular are very strong in Maxx. Mostly the Cogwork Arms. I'm going to start with that one. So Cogwork Arms is the equipment that you get to start with on the board. And it says when this is equipped, you put a steam counter on it. And then once per turn instant, you can remove a steam counter from it. And your next mech attack gets +1 and only activated if you boosted this turn. So the most important part about this is that it's any mech attack, including your Banksy. So you can make your Banksy come in for 4, which is a breakpoint, and this allows you to keep an extra counter on Hyperdriver. And I feel like this is like the theme of all these key cards is you gotta keep more counters on your hyperdrivers, and Cogwork base arms essentially lets you do that or threaten your opponent to like lose 2 cards on a Banksy, which is insane.
I agree. The arms is very, very good. I'm actually super high on the Just as well. Funny you should say it is largely for the same reason. I just find that having the one extra resource just gives you so much flexibility in a deck that is already like has resource flexibility, and just like very often this just is a Banksy swing. Like it's like the difference of like I can't swing Banksy. Oh, this turn I can cash this in and get a Banksy swing. Or this turn I couldn't have made a hyperdriver, but this gives me the extra resource to make a hyperdriver I wouldn't have been able to make otherwise. And both of those just feel super impactful. So I've found the Cogworks chest. Um, it often lets me kind of like ramp up and have a good turn that I otherwise wouldn't be able to have. Like I've gone second and been able to go like four boost, cash in my chest, make a hyperdriver arsenal a good card, and I've swung 8 and have a hyperdriver on 2, and that's like really really solid. And I'm pretty happy to just like burn it right away if I need to. But I often find that it just opens up lines and is worth either a whole hyperdriver or a whole Banksy swing, and both of those are pretty incredible.
Yes, yes. I think a note for the chest is you do need to have a resource to make two resources. Just be aware that there are going to be turns where you can't activate the Cogworks chest even if you wanted to. And so that also means that you should probably cash it in earlier than later, just in case that if you're getting low on life totals and you're forced to block, that also turns off your base chest, because then that means you have to pitch, let's say, a card to play your card, and if you don't have a floating resource, then you can't activate your chest either. And if you needed that resource to play your first card, it's kind of like it just doesn't work. So you should cash it in whenever you can if it's efficient to do so. Whenever the first time it's efficient to do so, you should probably cash it in.
Yeah, I think that's generally true. Maybe be a little more selective into Teklo if they're really trying hard to fatigue you. You can set it up as like another. It's sort of like, remember we said like you want to get your double hyperdriver to get the two resources. It's like if you have one hyperdriver, it's like you had a double hyperdriver turn. Is
Oh
another
yes,
way of thinking
yes.
of it. So it's very good for going over the top of Teklo. Or you can have like a triple hyperdriver turn effectively with this
Oh,
card.
that's gross. I see here you saying Hedron Collider or Boom Grenade? Two total?
Yeah, I think I actively want like 2 items in Maxx is kind of where I'm at right now. Usually these ones, Hadron Collider, Boom Grenade. I've been really, really, really liking these items as ways to go over the top. So once you get your hyper, the biggest thing I find myself doing with these cards is like once I get my double hyperdriver turn, being able to play one of these and crank them and then not make a hyperdriver that turn and still swing the Banksy feels really gross. Like the Hedron Collider is like essentially like a 2 for 6 with the Banksy on hit, and the Boom Grenade creates this like real awkward scenario where your opponent, like if you go like five boost, 4 boost Banksy, even if they spend all their cards blocking out the Boom Grenade, if you Banksy them and get a counter back on the Boom Grenade, you just kind of put them in the same spot. So I've liked having a couple items as ways to go over the top, but you don't want too many, because if you draw like items and pump cards, it's like your hand just doesn't do anything. So don't go nuts with them. But I've actually, the more I've played the deck, the more I've really liked having a couple of them. You can also go over the top of Teklo pretty well with this. Like if you end your turn on a Hadron Collider and Arsenal a card, it effectively lets you have like a 6 card hand plus your hyperdriver is kind of a thing.
That's gross, yeah. If I'm playing Teklo, my opponent ends on a Hydron Collider, you know you're gonna die next turn.
The items really do let you set up, and I think it's worth, like if I have a couple extra that I can board in for Teklo, I'm pretty happy to do that because the matchup, you have less pressure, so the no blocks don't hurt as much.
Okay, so those are basically all the key cards for the set for Maxx. As we said earlier, you still want as many 1 for 4 boost cards as you can get into your deck. What do you think about the zero cost for boost cards? The zero cost for 3 for the Reds?
I don't love them. I kind of am okay having like maybe one, but I really don't want that many. The reason I say one is like sometimes it allows you to play pitchless, which can be pretty good in some matchups, but you don't want a bunch of them because trading 2 cards in deck for 3 damage is just really poor, and Maxx is sometimes prone to fatiguing if you're not careful. So if you're just boosting a bunch of 0 for 3s, like you're gonna run out of deck for sure. I would never prioritize these, and it's more of a like, if I pick this late in the pack because there's nothing else and it's a 3 block, I might play 1 or 2 kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's more of it's gonna be more of like you will include these in your deck because you need cards in your deck, and they're gonna function like your 10th pick card. That's like, oh, okay, I guess there's a 0 to 50 red left in this pack, and a couple of items and some 2 blocks, and you're like, okay, this blocks for 3, and maybe it's a starter, so you pick it up. You're never gonna be looking at a pack with like 9, 8 cards in it and be like, I'm gonna take the 0 to 50 over like a full tilt, like a full tilt red and a 0 to 50 red. You should pick up the full tilt red. Like it's like,
Even a yellow full tilt, to be honest, like the yellow 2 for 4s, I take higher than these, for example.
yeah, yellow full tilt is, I would pick that over the 0 to 50 as well. So like that's where you have to be. Like that's how bad these cards are. Like they're fillers for your deck. They're not cards that you actively want in your deck.
We've been talking a lot about how important it is to get these hyperdrivers and keep them. Before we move on and talk about the deck outline, what do you think about the card hyperdriver itself? Because we've been doing a lot of talking about how important it is to get to 2 hyperdrivers and all of these things. Do you think the red hyperdriver, because it's the only one in the set, is a good card in Max? Where are you picking this? Are you playing it at all? What do you think?
In my mind, this card is similar to the 0 for 3 go agains, like the 0 for 3 boost cards. They're not good. Like you don't want a hyperdriver in your deck. If you can avoid it, if you see one very late and you have no other cards to pick, it's fine. It's just like it's a 1 cost card that makes you a hyperdriver that lets you swing Banksy after you crank it, because the card hyperdriver also gains crank with Max's ability, so you get to still crank it and like still play out your turn. So if you like are wanting to board up against like Teklo and it's like actively good, like against someone like Dash or the Max Mirror, this could be a huge liability, as it's a card that doesn't pitch and doesn't block on the turns you need it to.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm a little higher on it than you, but I agree that it's a card I'm picking very late in the pack. I'm hoping to get it like last like 3 picks kind of thing. I think if Max is open, this card often is going around because no one wants it, and you kind of get it very late. And I might play like one into Teklovos, and I think it's actually like actively very good in that matchup because it just lets you set up. You can very easily get to 2 hyperdrivers and sometimes even 3 with this card, and that's just really good. And it's just like a nice way to pad your deck that you don't really need to spend a real pick on. But I'm definitely not picking this card highly, and it's not premium. I think it does go up in value the more cards you have that care about hyperdrivers. So if your deck has like a lot, like a very high density of like jump starts, crankshafts, all that kind of stuff. This card, especially the cost reducers, the crankshafts, like you're probably going to have hyperdrivers anyways, but the cost reducers, this card does go up in value. Gas up, this card goes up in value, but again, I'm playing like one into Teklo kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that. Okay, let's talk about the deck outline. How many cards are you looking to play in this deck?
As many as I can. I think I want at least 35 cards in my max deck, or I'm pretty worried about getting fatigued. Even into max and dash, if I have reasonable cards to run, I would run more rather than less, because we kind of talked about how the deck plays these like small hands really well, and you can do like 2 card 7s, 2 card 8s, but you're still taking 2 cards out of your deck because there's a card you boost and the card that you play. So you kind of like weirdly, like the games can still go to fatigue. Like there's games where you blow each other up and they don't go to fatigue, but there's also games that do go to fatigue. So I think you always want to have like a big deck if possible, because it just lets you kind of like focus on playing efficiently and not worry as much about running out of cards.
Yep, I agree with you fully. How many equipments are you looking for then? Like the ones that, not the evos that go in your deck, but like the cogwork base arms, like those kinds of things. Are you trying to actively find 4, or are you trying to like maybe if you see like a good 3 block, like let's say like a blue 3 block, are you picking a blue 3 block over these like equipments from outside your deck?
Yeah, I think I would rather have the blue 3 block than like the blade break ones. The cogwork chest and arms are like reasonably high picks for me. I think they're very good. But I think that like if I have like the cogworks chest and arms and then 40 cards, like that would be my ideal. You probably can't do that. Like you probably have some unplayable picks. That's just how it goes. But if I had my way, that's probably what I would be aiming for. So I don't think you want to draft. I think you want some equipment, but you don't want too many. And the blade break ones are, you can take them if there's like really nothing in the pack for you. But I think even like a yellow 0 to 60, I'm more inclined to take because if I know I'm max anyways, just because I like you just need cards in deck. If you have like a 33 card max deck, or you have a max deck where you're having to play like 15 items to make playables, like you're gonna have a bad time. What about you?
I think I'm a little bit higher than you at picking up equipments like Takalo Base Head, which is the Blade Break 1 headpiece. I picked this up kind of highly. It's really good against like dash, where if they set up a boom grenade turn, you get to like actually block them out. And if you don't have one of these like blade breaks, then you get blown out, like for sure.
Yeah,
And so in the dash and the max matchups, I actually kind of feel like if you can present four equipments, you end up like significantly ahead of your opponent.
that's true.
I'm a little bit more of like, if it's a card that's not like a 1 for 4 boost or a 2 for 5 boost, a a red boom grenade that's like actively like, other than the cards that I'm like actively picking up for the deck, if it's like a filler card, I would rather pick up the base head. So that also just means I'm like fourth picking a base head, or like a fifth picking a base head. It's like I'm actually like kind of higher than you at where I'm picking up these bases. And I feel like it does show during our drafts, cuz like I always see you present like two, maybe three
Hmm.
equipments, and
Hmm.
then like both me and I think Lucas has the same strategy. We actively try and flip up four equipments like almost every single time we're playing Max and Dash.
I value them very highly as dash. I'm with you on dash. I'm a little more nervous on max. I think I like having like I just like having cards in deck for the Tekla matchup as max, but I agree that they are very good in the aggro matchups. I think it comes down to what you're more confident in. If you're very confident in your ability to go over Teklo, like I guess it's like often like the better my max deck is, the more I'm willing. Like if I just have like a max deck with really high card quality and pretty good card count, I'm more willing to pick them up. If I'm like a little bit shakier, I'd want some extra cards in deck.
That's fair. The worse your Max deck, the more cards you just want in your deck.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that's sort of where I'm at. So if my draft's going really well, I agree. I'll sacrifice some picks for them, but I think I'm I think I value the cards in deck and max a little bit higher than the cards in deck and dash, relatively speaking.
Yep. I think that's a fair assessment too. Okay. So what is your deck breakdown? How many reds? How many blues? How many items?
I'm usually wanting like 35 to 40 cards. Honestly, like as much red and yellow boost that comes in for 4 and 5 usually, that I can. Like often like 20. Like I'm hoping for like 20-ish, 20, maybe slightly over 20. Somewhere in the realm of like 9 to 12 blues. If I'm playing 40 cards, I probably want, yeah, like 11, 12 blues. And then I want some number of items and pumps, because those cards basically have go again, but don't require you to boost and are really important when it comes to like the fatigue matchup, especially. I think I'm usually playing 6 to 8 of these. I think I want access to about 8 items or pumps for Teklovosin, and then against Dash and Max, I think I'm playing like 5 to 6, because they're always 3 card hands. Like if you have like a Hadron Collider, or you have like a Gas Up or a Recharge or whatever, you always need the blue, the boost card, and the pump, or the blue, the boost card, and the item. And sometimes in those aggro matchups, you just don't get to keep 3 card hands, especially in the late games, and they can really, really, really get you into trouble. So I think you still want like a couple, but I'm definitely trimming them into the aggro matchups if I can, and presenting a couple extra into deck Levosin, because you want cards in deck and you're not as pressured.
That's super fair. If you ever drop like a 2 item hand against like the Max mirror, you're getting blown up. Like if you can't block out the Banksy, and they ended up playing like a 4 card hand on you, oh, you're leaking way too much damage.
Yeah, I think my rule is like I want like 2 items maximum, like 2 red items at most. Is sort of where I'm at right now, if I can help it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Maybe a third is fine if it's like 2 red boom grenades and a Hedron Collider.
Yeah, I could maybe play 3. I had to play 4 into Lucas, and I died because I drew 2 of them.
Yep, that's
So it is like a thing that happens. Yeah, you wanna play it safe. It depends how good your deck is, but yeah, like 2, maybe 3. You don't want too many into the aggro decks. It will. I swear it will come to bite you. Like maybe not. Maybe you'll play 2 games and it'll be fine, and then your third game you'll lose to it. Like it's just a matter of time. It feels like.
yeah. The more games you play, it's gonna happen at least once.
Yeah, exactly.
Then I think that's the deck outline. Are there cards to avoid or cards that you think are overrated by the average player right now?
Yeah, there's a few. So we talked about the zero cost boost cards being bad. Similarly, the zero cost scrap cards that come in for 1, 2, or 3 at blue, yellow, and red are even worse because they don't boost. Just like you really, the blue ones are fine. Actually, the blue ones are fine. They're blue block threes, but the yellow and reds, like you really don't want these cards. And then the last ones that I have is kind of, I don't think they're unplayable or anything, but I think that they get overdrafted and they're really overrated. Is Burn Rubber and Smash and Grab. These are both 3 for 5s that if you've boosted twice get +2. Burn Rubber makes it so that your opponent can't block with equipment, and Smash and Grab says your opponent you gain control of an item your opponent controls if it hits. Of the two, Smash and Grab is better. It has text into dash. But my big thing about these cards is like the base, like the floor of a 3 for 5 red is terrible. And when you do the thing, like it's like not that easy to boost twice and then play a 3 cost. And when you do the thing, you're getting a 3 for 7, which is good. But the set just has 3 for 7s. It has, like you can just play Infused Titanium, or you can play like Junkyard Dog, which is a 3 for 6 and asks so much. Like it's really easy to turn on. You can just like block with an equipment and turn on your Junkyard Dog or something. And it's just like, why? Like, I don't know. I think people pick these cards highly and they're like, this is a reason to draft Maxx. And I think they're more like filler that you're hoping to get late in the pack. I guess they just ask you to jump through a lot of hoops for not that much payoff.
I think Smash and Grab is just a little bit better, just because like when you do have a Smash and Grab against Dash, and you get to pull this off, it feels like the Dash player can never win after stealing their like Overload script or their Boom Grenade, whatever card that they decided to keep by not cranking it on the end of their turn, and you get to steal that, you're winning that game for sure now. So like Smash and Grab is like has a higher payoff when it does work, but the times it works is not that often.
Yeah, we kind of talked about how it's like hard to keep 5 card hands in the aggro mirrors, and I think that's like largely the problem with these cards is that they usually demand 5 card hands. Those are hard to keep. I don't know. At least it does block 3, so they're not disasters. Like they're not unplayables. They're reasonably better than the zero cost boosts and stuff like that. I think that people think that these cards are better than they are, basically.
Yeah, overrated.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess from this cycle, there's one other card. It's called Big Shot. Do you like this card?
I love Big Shot. I think Big Shot's actively really good and a pretty early pick, and I'm happy to play it in any deck. Just the floor of 3 for 6 is much more acceptable. Like if you just get to like you can arsenal this card if you need to, and then just like keep 1 card, throw a 6, and it's fine. It blocks 3. And when you do the thing and you come in for a 3 for 8, you feel like you're actually getting a payoff. So I actually like Big Shot. I think it's pretty good, and I'm pick this reasonably highly. Yeah, I think it's much better than the other ones. What about you?
Yeah, I think I agree. Just the floor on this card being just a little bit higher makes this card much more acceptable, and then its ceiling is technically not as high as Smash and Grab, but it's definitely a little bit higher than Burn Rubber. So just like overall, its floor being a little higher and its ceiling being a little higher than Burn Rubber is like makes this card better than those two for sure.
It's also just more consistent. Like I think the big thing for me is like Smash and Grab's good into like Dash and Maxx, but Big Shot, like 8 damage is good against everybody. And I almost feel like Tekla Vosin is the matchup where you're trying to do like the really big turn where you boost twice and then throw a big attack. Like that's the matchup where this is the most relevant. And in that matchup, you would much rather do 8 than either the burn rubber or the smash and grab.
Talk about some different archetypes for Maxx. So we've been talking about this boost Maxx deck. I feel like that's gonna be the general simple version of Maxx. You're gonna get into it almost like every single time.
Mhm.
There is one other type of deck that I lost to actually this weekend. Was Leveler Maxx. In this set, Tekla Leveler isn't a specialization, so you can actually play it in every hero. So you could play Tekla Leveler with Max Nitro. And the time that this is going to be a real thing would be if you're playing Max and you don't think you have a way to go over the top of Teklo and if you think they're going to deck you out no matter what. Then what you should do is that you should play Teklo Leveler with Max with some Evos, so then you can try and deck Teklo out. This doesn't always work out because Teklo is just like a better. You're basically playing the mirror now, but they have more text than you. So this is a big liability. But if you registered Max already, and you know there's no way to like beat the Teklo by going over the top, like you don't have enough overpowered, you don't have enough of these like ways to set up 5 or 6 card hands, then you should probably play Leveler if you have 3 Evos in your deck and play these like really conservative, just like a fatigue plan into Teklo. And a card that really helps you with doing this will be Evil Circuit Breaker. Evil Circuit Breaker is the head red majestic Evo that lets you shuffle in 2 attack actions from your banish back into your deck. If you play this, shuffle a bunch of your boost cards back into your deck, and then you can like actually keep pressuring the Teklo so they can't come at you with a 4-card hand, and you'll end up fatiguing out the Teklo. And that's actually exactly how I lost my win in for the top 8 for the PTA event. I was like 2 cards short with my like. It was a really good Teklo deck. I ended up 2-1ing that draft pod, but couldn't beat the Evil Circuit Breaker Leveler Maxx. Ugh, felt bad.
So wild. I would be so afraid of playing this deck and like boosting away my Evos. I remember our local Clay played it, and I asked him, "What happens if you boost your Evos?" And he's like, whatever. Just like don't boost too many of them." I'm like, okay. So I think this is not a deck you are trying to draft, but it is sort of like something you can sometimes do. I think another thing to be aware of is like most of the time, if you can do this, you should probably just play Teklovosin. I guess the reasons not to would be you already registered Maxx, like Jay said, or maybe if you just like really have no reason to be Teklo, like you have no scrap, you don't really have that many blues, you have like above average boost, like maybe you can try this. I still don't know if it's better than Teklo because maybe you just like boost into it. I don't know.
No, I think it's better than Teklo if your deck outline, like as we talked about in the deck outline, we have like 20 red to yellow boost cards with 4 to 5 powers. So like if you have like a lot of outpaces, a lot of Mad X's, a lot of under loops, like not the 2 for 5s, but a lot of the 1 for 4s. If you have like a lot of yellows, and if you're already in your pool, you have like 3 recharges red. So like you have this like super streamlined boost deck lined up. That might not be good enough against Teklo if you have like no cards that read overpowered. They get to still deck you out, right? So if you really can't set up these like multiple turns that can go over the top, then you could do this like backdoor plan into the Teklo decks, and then play your regular boost plan against the Max Mir and the dash matchup.
I have not drafted this deck or seen it, but it sounds very interesting. Hopefully, I don't have to draft it at Worlds. I would prefer not to.
But it's a good thing to keep in your arsenal, like just like
It is. It
just
is.
be like, oh man, I'm playing in this pod with like super good drafters, and my draft deck is being the most medium deck possible, and then the people in your pod is like, yes, we got Yuki into Maxx, like a very mediocre Maxx deck, and then you're like, oh, present Leveler against you,
It's true.
deck you out.
It's true. Hopefully, Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but we'll see. I do think that one of the cool things about this format is, and I really felt this at the PTI event because we had people visiting from out of town, so it was outside of our local meta, and you kind of had like multiple metas, and all the pods were a little different. Is it feels like the way that people draft the format and value the cards was noticeably different between each draft pod, and it felt like I was getting rewarded for just like I drafted every hero once, and it felt like I got really rewarded for being flexible in the draft and understanding how to like make use of the cards I was given and draft, like various archetypes, and it just the more flexible you could be, the more options you had, and that was really valuable when you, especially at an event like Worlds where maybe you don't know the people you're drafting with and you're not familiar with the draft meta, and you might be used to drafting in a certain way, but then they also prioritize those cards and you have to do something different.
Yeah, it's got to be tough. Like, this format is difficult. There's a lot of nuance to it. Every card is kind of playable in your deck, and I feel like there are niche ways to use a lot of the cards. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
for example, like, I'm kind of high on backup protocol red in this deck too still. And
Yeah.
there are ways to make backup protocol red, like, a card that feels like the best card in the deck. Whereas like a regular boost Maxx deck would never want to play a backup protocol red. So there are small synergies. I know a couple of people who like dissolving shield and Maxx, and I kind of like dissolving shield and Maxx too, but that's like a completely different strategy. Being able to like trying to set up like a dissolving shield by playing it, cranking it, attacking with a Banksy with the floating resource. And then now there's, even if you don't have a hyperdriver up, them letting the Banksy hit and putting a counter on dissolving shields kind of disastrous for your opponent. So they still have to block out the Banksy. And then now you get to guarantee keep a 5-card hand for the next turn because you have dissolving shield up. Kind of feels good too. So like there are super weird niches in this format where you can do to make your deck very unique. Another card I like is like Steam Canister. Steam Canister at
Oh,
Maxx is kind of sick, so
not the steam canister.
I'm just letting you guys know right now. Steam Canister at Maxx, if you can find a way to make this card work in Maxx, you're gonna blow people out.
Yeah. Uh, the reason I'm reacting like this is I played Jay round one of the PTI event. He was playing Dash, not Maxx. He found a polarity script off the top, and then you also found a steam. Was the steam canister also off the top on the following turn or something?
So yeah, so this is like turn 5 or something. So I know that I'm drawing into a Steam Canister on the turn after, and it just happened to be on the top of the deck. So I got the Polarity Reversal script, Steam Canister, keep a counter on it, and then I did something else to keep another counter on it, right?
No, you played this. You played it off the top, so you got a
Oh, I
turn with
didn't
it.
crank it. Yeah, I didn't crank it.
Yeah, and then it stayed around, and you got to steam canister, put another counter in. So he got 3 turns with his polarity reversal script, and just like won this game that I felt kind of ahead in until then, and it was just like,
Nah,
oh,
nah, Yuki. I knew this card was coming up. I was setting this up. I parked my 1 for 4 boost at Arsenal until my polarity reversal script came up.
yeah, but you don't know
You
that you're gonna hit it off the top.
you gotta pitch stack. You gotta pitch stack it.
It was
Honestly, though,
first
it was first
cycle.
cycle, so I just nattied it off the top, and the game was not close. But I knew it was coming up. I knew it was coming. I was playing to it. I was playing to it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And the last match against Andrew Podleski in the first draft, my polarity reversal script's the last card of my like the first cycle. I drew it up on a turn with like 2 items. Couldn't pitch the polarity reversal script. Had to arsenal it. Oh, it was so bad.
Oh, yeah, that is not ideal.
No, no. I ended up like 4-2ing the BTA event and bubbling ninth, 10th, something like that. So, ugh, so sad, so sad. I really wanted to top 8 that event.
Yeah,
Um,
fair enough.
okay.
Okay.
That's basically everything we wanted to talk about Maxx, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've been rambling for long enough. So we can wrap it up here. If you are playing Worlds, or I believe there's a Battle Harden coming up this weekend, if the episode comes out in time, I don't know, we'll see. Then good luck to you, or whatever events you have. Skirmish is around the corner, for example. Um, and if you have thoughts about the format, let us know. Maybe there's Maxx archetypes that we don't know about, and you can let us know about that in the comments down below. That'd be fantastic. If you want to reach out to us, you can do so either in the comments or on social media. Jay is at Ueda J on Twitter. I'm at Yukili Bender, or you can email us directly at onthebauble@gmail.com. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and good luck in your Bright Lights drafts or any other events that you have around the corner.